Have you ever felt so alone in your prayer that it seemed like God wasn't listening? Like all the words coming out of your mouth just disappeared into the void, leaving you with that painful feeling of abandonment. Maybe you've tried praying countless times, but deep down, you still had that nagging doubt. Does praying silently in my thoughts actually work? Does God pay attention when I don't speak out loud? That doubt is more common than you think, and the truth that few people talk about is that the Bible in its depth teaches us exactly the opposite. Praying in silence, deep in your heart, is one of the most powerful ways to connect with God. The promise you haven't heard, but one that could change your life, is that God is attentive not just to words, but to silence, to the hidden sighs, to the prayer that doesn't need sound to be heard. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. This verse doesn't speak of booming prayers, but of the whisper of the heart, that silent communication that happens in the solitude of the soul. Imagine a place where you can hide from the noise of the world and your own doubts. A place that's not necessarily a grand temple, but a little corner where only you and God exist. It's there in the quiet, where silent prayer is born. You don't need rehearsed words or perfect formulas. All you need is a heart ready to surrender, even when your mind keeps wandering, bringing 1,000 distractions, anxieties, thoughts that make you question if this is all worth it. And here comes the shock. The mind is not your friend at this moment. It wants to convince you that silence is empty, that praying without speaking out loud is useless, that God isn't listening. But the Bible reveals a subversive secret. God works precisely in the silence, where the soul is open and available. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. Isaiah 30:15. This strength doesn't come from the words you say, but from the surrender you make, even when you feel like nothing is happening. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, am I the only one who struggles to pray in silence? The answer is no. Many of the great biblical characters faced this internal struggle. Moses, Elijah, even Jesus in Gethsemane withdrew to moments of silence where they didn't need to say much to feel God's presence. It's in the silence that transformation begins, even when the heart is troubled and the mind is loud. What if I told you that this state of silence isn't weakness, but the fertile ground where God plants the faith that sustains the soul? That silent prayer is a sacred language, understood by God even before you think it. That's hard to accept when everything inside you screams for immediate answers, when anxiety tries to steal your peace. But it's there that true intimacy with God begins, not in the words you speak, but in the moment when you learn to simply be, to be present, to trust. Are you willing to experience that silence, to accept that praying in thought isn't just valid but necessary? Because the Bible doesn't call us to a noisy faith full of distractions, but to a deep relationship where even silence speaks. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Matthew 6:6. It's not in the crowd or the noise that God reveals himself first, but in the stillness of your heart. This journey begins right here, in the moment you decide that it's worth letting your mind rest and listening with your heart. Because God doesn't just hear the silence, he inhabits it. And it's in that silent mystery that your life can finally find the peace you've always sought. Imagine for a moment a place that exists just for you, a secret refuge where the world outside loses its sound and its rush. It could be a quiet corner of your home, maybe that room no one enters, or even the bathroom if it's the only place where you can be alone. It doesn't matter how small or simple that place is. What truly matters is the heart that opens there, ready to meet God in the intimacy of silence. That place, often overlooked even by ourselves, is where silent prayer truly blooms. In the silence of that invisible space, you discover that prayer doesn't need a voice or structured words. It's a meeting, a surrender that goes far beyond verbal expression. The Bible reminds us, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." Matthew 6:6. That secret room is more than a physical location. It's a state of mind, a disposition of the heart to disconnect from the noise and connect with the divine. But don't be fooled. This journey isn't an easy one. The mind, so used to agitation and turmoil, will try to sabotage you. 1,000 thoughts will invade your silence. Concerns, doubts, memories, plans that arise to take you away from this sacred encounter. You may even feel like giving up, convinced that you can't quiet yourself, that silent prayer is empty. But here's the surprising truth. These thoughts are not enemies, but tools that God uses to teach you to surrender control and trust Him, even in the inner chaos. By allowing those thoughts to come and go, without resistance, you begin to develop a rare and precious skill, the ability to quiet not only your body, but also your mind and heart. It's a delicate, almost invisible process, but deeply transformative. Silent prayer isn't a search for mystical sensations or grand experiences. It's simply being available for God to work in you, in His time and in the way He chooses. And that's where the miracle happens. Even when it seems like nothing is moving, that the silence is empty, God is at work. The Bible says that He makes all things new, Revelation 21:5. And this renewal starts right in that secret space where only you and He exist. You'll begin to notice subtle changes. Unexpected patience in the face of difficulties, wisdom arising to guide your decisions, faith strengthening to face the challenges of daily life. That secret place of silent prayer is an invisible sanctuary where your character is shaped, prepared to receive the blessings that God has already planned for your life. It's in that space that your spiritual life stops being a constant struggle and becomes a path of peace and transformation. Because in the end, it's not the place that matters. It's the surrender of your heart that opens the door to God's living presence. At the start of this silent prayer journey, you may feel like you're engaged in an endless internal battle. Your mind, that restless companion, feels like a chaotic storm of thoughts invading your sacred space, stealing the peace you're desperately seeking. It's as if every time you try to quiet yourself, voices, doubts, fears, memories rise up, shouting for you to give up, to flee from that silence that feels empty and despairing. But here's the reality check that few are brave enough to say. This mental storm is not a sign of failure nor divine abandonment. On the contrary, the Bible reveals that God allows this internal struggle to teach us something deep and essential. He calls us to trust Him precisely when everything inside us screams the opposite. When I am afraid, I will trust in you. Psalm 56:3 is not a hollow phrase. It's an invitation to embrace the vulnerability of the restless mind and surrender every thought to God. Have you noticed how the mind tries to convince you that silence is a prison, that the absence of answers is abandonment? That's where the greatest paradox of silent prayer is revealed. God is neither distant nor deaf. He is present, using these turbulent moments to shape your faith, to build a solid foundation that doesn't depend on feelings or the words you speak. That feeling of emptiness, of loneliness in the silence, is the space where God prepares your soul for unwavering trust. It's a dark process, sometimes painful, because it requires you to let go of control and surrender to the mystery of God's invisible presence. But it's precisely in this surrender that true spiritual freedom is born. The Bible shows us that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 46:1. He is the anchor in the storm of your mind, and silent prayer is the moment when you learn to grab hold of that anchor, even when you don't feel secure. So don't blame yourself for the thoughts that distract you, nor despair when the silence feels too empty. This is the brutal truth that few dare to share. The inner struggle is part of the divine process of growth. God uses this turmoil to teach you to rest in Him, to trust the invisible, to find peace, not in circumstances, but in the certainty that He is working in you, even when everything seems silent. Allow yourself to live this paradox, the mental storm that's not your enemy, but the invitation to a deeper, truer faith. Because in that turbulent silence, God does His most powerful work, preparing you to experience a relationship with Him that transcends any word or thought. In the silence that once seemed empty and unsettling, something begins to shift in a subtle but deep way. It's there, in that space where your mind no longer screams and your heart surrenders, that God starts to work in silence, not just to comfort but to transform. The Bible teaches us that shaping character is a divine work, a patient sculpture that happens when you surrender your thoughts, emotions, and doubts to the invisible touch of the Holy Spirit. You may not see it immediately, but little by little your patience strengthens. That quick irritation in the face of difficulties gives way to an inexplicable calm. Decisions that once seemed confusing begin to clarify, not through a fleeting moment, but through wisdom born from quiet fellowship with God. And faith, it stops being a fragile hope and becomes a firm rock, capable of sustaining you even on the stormiest days. The process is as delicate as it is invisible, a true spiritual alchemy. God works in the depths of your being, preparing you to receive blessings that often seem distant, almost impossible. It's in this moment that the silence of prayer reveals itself as a divine laboratory where your character is forged for greater challenges, for a purpose that transcends your immediate understanding. Do you feel this transformation? Maybe not yet in words, but in the way your gaze lingers longer, how your breath slows down in the face of problems, how the desire to give up gives way to perseverance. This is God's silent work that makes no noise, but changes everything within. The Bible doesn't promise the journey will be easy, but it does guarantee that those who trust in the Lord will be renewed like the eagle. Isaiah 40:31, finding strength to soar even when everything around seems to collapse. In the silence of prayer, you are shaped, prepared for the life God planned, one marked by wisdom, courage, and unshakable faith. When you start to hear God in the silence of your heart, something extraordinary happens with your prayers spoken in words. The Bible reveals that it's not just words that move the heavens, but the faith that springs from that intimate, silent, and deep space. Before, your prayers may have felt like blind attempts, a mix of hope and doubt, seeking answers that seemed far away. But true prayer comes from the certainty that comes from silence, that invisible connection that no one sees, but God deeply perceives. You'll notice that your words cease to be empty and start to have a clear purpose, aligned with His divine will. Prayer stops being an uncertain request and becomes a powerful affirmation, a heart-to-heart conversation where you're not just speaking, but also listening and obeying. Confess your faults to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. James 5:16. Because the prayer that comes from silence also brings healing and transformation. It's a waking up to a new spiritual dimension, praying with certainty and authority, knowing that your words have weight because they come from a heart that has learned to be silent and trust. This change isn't magical nor instantaneous, but it's real and tangible for those who surrender to the practice of silent prayer. You go from being an anxious prayer to becoming a confident intercessor, sustained by a faith that surpasses what the eyes can see. Imagine this, a prayer that doesn't depend on external noise, but on intimate communion with God, where every word spoken echoes in heaven because it comes from a spirit aligned with His purpose. This is the power of silent prayer. It prepares you to speak with authority, pray with power, and experience answers that transform lives. The Bible calls us to this depth, and the door to this transformation is open in the silence of your heart. When your life begins to breathe in the harmony of silence and continuous prayer, you become more than just a believer. You transform into a beacon of light in the darkness of this world, thirsty for truth and peace. It's not just any light, but a living flame that comes from the constant awareness of God's presence, that presence that dwells in you, even in the most difficult moments, in the storms of everyday life. The Bible teaches us that true faith manifests in quiet acts of love and perseverance, not in grand speeches or signs. Being this light means carrying in your heart the peace that surpasses all understanding, Philippians 4:7. A peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, but illuminates and comforts those who cross your path. Your inner transformation, cultivated in the silence of prayer, is the most powerful testimony you can offer. Even in the midst of chaos, your peaceful heart draws attention and sparks curiosity. It's like a lighthouse guiding lost ships on a stormy night. This light doesn't come from human effort, but from daily surrender, from living in the constant awareness of God's presence in every gesture, word, and thought. You become an instrument of hope, a channel through which God touches lives that long for something real. And this mission is not a burden, but a natural consequence of silent prayer. When your character is shaped in secret, your influence extends beyond what you can imagine, reaching lives you may never meet personally, but who feel the impact of your living, present faith. It's in this role that you find a greater purpose, to be a light that doesn't go out, even in the darkest nights. Thus, silent prayer not only transforms you, but the entire world around you, because God chooses to work through those who have learned to listen in silence and act with love and courage. And the question that remains is, how will your light shine today? We've come to the most crucial moment of this silent journey, the decision that could change everything. Are you ready to abandon empty prayers, those words that often seem to echo into the void without direction or power? Are you willing to take the first step toward an intimacy with God that transcends sounds and words, to enter the sanctuary of silence where true transformation happens? The Bible is full of invitations for this deep encounter, where silence isn't absence but living presence. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you, James 4:8, is not just a promise. It's a direct challenge to those who want to experience a faith that truly moves mountains. Praying in thought, in silence, is opening yourself to a connection that doesn't depend on noise, form, or time, but on the sincerity and surrender of the heart. It may seem scary. After all, silence reveals what we often try to hide: our doubts, fears, even the sense that we're not enough. But it's precisely in this vulnerability that God acts with the greatest power. He calls us to an authentic relationship, bare and raw, where we don't need to pretend but simply be. This is the invitation to transform your prayer, your life, and your relationship with God. The choice is before you. Continue on the surface or dive into the depths of sacred silence, where everything changes and where you finally find the peace and strength you've always sought. What will you choose? Your soul knows the answer. Just have the courage to listen to it and act. Now, with that question burning in your heart, prepare to take the next step, because true prayer begins when silence becomes your ally and God, your constant presence. Congratulations for watching this video all the way through. It shows that you are truly seeking wisdom and growth in the light of Christian faith, a crucial step in strengthening your spiritual walk. We'd love to hear your experience or thoughts on what you've heard here today, so leave your comment below, and if you're not sure what to write, just type, "I'm thankful to God." This way, we'll know who stayed with us until the end of this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep receiving content that builds, strengthens, and transforms your spiritual life. And to help you even more on your journey, we've left 2 more recommended videos at the end, with deep reflections that can be true nourishment for your soul. May God bless you and continue to illuminate every step of your path.